Hello everyone, my name is Estrella Vargas and I'm a proud employee here at CAN TV. And today we're going to be talking about the Cuba Initiative that the Latino Art Beat it holds every year. And today I have Don Rosinuccio. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here.
And he's gonna talk to us about the Latino Art Beat, art in the Latino community, and this amazing Cuba initiative that is going to happen this year for the second time. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the Latino Art Beat and how it came to be?
Well, I co-founded Latino Art Beat 21 years ago as a result of driving through Douglas Park here in Chicago with one of my nephews, and I asked him, "What are you going to do this summer?" And he said, "I'm going to do a barbecue in my backyard and have some of my artist friends," because he was studying art at Curie High School. And as we were driving past this old pavilion in Douglas Park, I said, "I have an idea." So I pulled up, got to the pavilion, and I said, "You're not going to have a barbecue. We're going to do a little small event here in Douglas Park, and we're going to invite the neighbors to come and bring their artwork." And we solicited local high schools, and we had about 300 kids that showed up to our event. I gave out $300 in prizes, and that launched Latino Art Beat.
Wow. And so why did you choose the Latino community? Why is it so important for you to spread the importance of art in this community?
Well, first of all, at that time, and even today, I felt that the Latino community was underserved. And it was beginning to grow into an explosive demographic, not only in Chicago, but in the United States. And I had previously been involved as an entrepreneur in the entertainment business, and I worked with people like Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson and many others, and I thought, let me bring some of my expertise to our local Latino community here in Chicago and see how it goes. I think art is very important for everyone, but in particular, because the Latino community or the Hispanic community is such an expansive community. I mean, we have over 30 nations, which means different cultures, different religious background, different customs. So I thought, let's target these young people in arts and in the Latino community. And quite apart from the fact that I have a Latino background, I thought, let me support my own community.
Yes, and I see that you were featured in a newspaper, and your impact is not going unnoticed, so that is amazing. And they call you an art lover and youth advocate. I'm going to read a quote from the newspaper, and you say, "Truthfully, I don't know. I thoroughly love what I do. I love learning something new and working with youth across the country. To witness their drive and creativity is always amazing to see. They flourish as artists. I am in a constant state of learning just by working with these youth, and I will always be grateful." So I can tell that you have been impacted by the work that you do, but most importantly, the students you're helping and you're working with. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. We initially started out Latino Art Beat as a Chicago program. And then a couple years in, because we were doing Hispanic festivals, we call them, during National Hispanic Heritage Month, which is September 15th to October 15th. General Motors, the large automobile giant, caught drift of what we were doing. And they reached out to us as the result of a letter from one of our state senators saying, we had an old beat-up van, and could they donate something to us? So not only did they donate a brand new spanking red van, they started sponsoring our program. So it took the program from Chicago to a national program.
So funding, now that we're on that topic, the U.S. Now is, well, the president currently in the White House doesn't really like the arts and doesn't want to fund these programs in schools. So I know funding is a huge part of the Latino Art Week because it helps students get scholarships so they can pursue the arts in college and further their education. So what do you think about, this rhetoric, this anti-rhetoric of art?
Well, being an art advocate and working with youth and heading a non-for-profit, we usually don't like to get into the political atmosphere because we have to work with all the parties, Democrats, Republicans, Socialists, Independents, etc. However, in this particular case, organizations like ours are totally dependent on public support. So for us to operate, we have to get support from commercial partners, sponsors, academic sponsors, and government agencies. And with the new ruling that the current president wants to do is, and I'll just quote some figures here, he wants to cut the NEA's budget from $150 million to $29 million.
Wow.
And additionally, something that will affect not only us, but you, CAN TV, the administration is proposing to cut from $490 million, which is given to support public television, to a paltry $15 million. So we're affected by it, we're concerned by it, and we struggle to make sure that we can maintain ourselves. We're now in our 21st year, and each year gets more difficult to raise funding to operate the program.
And so, touching along the lines of, anti-art, I am part of the Latino community and proud, but growing up, art wasn't really a career or a money-making industry that I could pursue. So I see this anti-art rhetoric around my family members and friends, but since you specifically work with the Latino community, have you seen these perspectives, and how are you helping to combat these issues?
Over our 21-year scope of being in the community, initially I saw a lot of resistance from the Latino families, saying, my kid should be working in the grocery store like his dad did. My daughter, she should get a job as the typical prototype, a maid or a nurse or that type of thing. And gradually, as we infiltrated the Latino communities, not only in Chicago, but in all the other cities in which we operate, we've now seen a change. People are realizing, and when I say people, I mean Latino families, are realizing that there's a wide expanse of professions that can come out of the visual as well as the performing arts. For example, computer technology. It requires some artistic ability to design. Former sponsors like ours, General Motors, they're hiring young artists to design their automobiles. Then we have websites. Everyone is on the computer and they have either a Facebook or they have a website. And our young artists are getting into this type of technology. And there's an expanse of jobs available. Quite apart from in our film and animation division, we encourage young Latino filmmakers on to from education to careers. You're talking about writers, script editors, actors, cinematographers, dolly boys. Now you have an expanse of job opportunities which Latinos didn't focus on in the past.
Yeah, and so you touch up on a great ideas and topics, but the importance is that you're letting these communities know that art is not just painting on a canvas. It's film, it's acting, it's everything. It incorporates everything in the job industries, and now it's being required more because it uses creativity. And so now with this, you've been doing this for 20 years, and so how have you seen these perspectives of the Latino families change?
Well, and another important category that I want to add on to this to answer your question, teaching. Today, in this year, there are more Latinas, female Latinos, that are involved in teaching than 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the majority of Latinas, their job was in nursing, believe it or not. And then secondary, it was maids. Now it's teaching. So we have had so many students that won scholarships through our program because we award scholarships to the winners in each one of our cities and each of our competitions, so that they're able to go on to higher education. And a lot of these young ladies have gone into teaching, and they come back to Latino Art Beat 10, 15 years later as volunteers.
That's amazing. So I see you have done work all across the United States, but now we're going to touch on the Cuba Initiative because you've expanded to Cuba, and that's, amazing because you're going overseas now and you're getting new perspectives, like international perspectives. So can you tell us a little bit more about this Cuba Initiative, and then we can touch on the artwork that we have been seeing.
This is a very interesting story. Back in February of 2016, I was invited into the public liaison office of former President Obama's White House. And we had a discussion, and that discussion resulted in me getting an invitation to attend the president's visit in Havana, Cuba.
Wow.
Now, I had met former President Obama when he was Illinois State Senator. We've had conversations about education in the arts, and this was just a logical step for us. So when I was in Cuba during the White House's visit and former President Obama's visit, I actually approached the Ministry of Culture in Havana. And coming from the White House invitation, this gave me more impetus to sit down and say, hey, this is what we do in the United States. We're a Latino organization. We encourage an understanding of culture, which is so very important, and we would like to introduce our program here. Now, the Cubans initially had resistance. They said, education is free in Cuba. We can only wish that education was free in the United States.
I wish.
So we didn't approach it as, here's a scholarship for the winners of a local competition. Here's an opportunity to bring a couple young, aspiring Cuban artists to study in the United States and get exposed to technology that might not be available in Cuba. And that sold them. So we then worked with the Ministry of Culture, and we worked with a division of the ministry called Casas de Cultura, and we organized a countrywide competition in Cuba,
Wow.
focused basically on Western Cuba, so Havana, Pinar del Rio, and in those districts there. And then hopefully we wish to repeat this again this year as our second initiative, and then open it up to the central and the western parts of Cuba.
That's amazing. And we can show a little clip of the Cuba program that happened last year in...
Last summer,
Last
it
summer.
culminated.
Okay. So why did you choose Cuba?
Well, the relations between Cuba and the United States have come to a standstill as a result of the Cuban Revolution and the former Soviet Russian influence there. And being an island state, so close to the state of Miami, and being a very important part of Latino culture and history, all we have to do is think about music, and you think about the influence that Cuba has made on music. art. Some of the most fabulous pieces of artwork has come out of Cuba. So I said, Cuba is nearby, but it's a challenge. And I've always liked the challenge in my life. And I said, Cuba's going to be a challenge, and I'm going to make it happen. Now, we had a lot of people that helped us, a lot of consultants, a lot of advisors, a lot of people in Cuba and in Washington that made it happen. But I think that's why I picked Cuba. Plus, our Miami program is one of the biggest parts of Latino Art Beat. And most of our national winners have come from Miami high schools, and most of those kids are Cuban American. So I said, if Cuba is producing this type of talent from generation to generation, I want to step foot on that island and see what we can do. And that's how it happened.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've always wanted to go to Cuba because, you know, the culture, again, you say the music and a lot of the influence it has on other countries has been, like, apparent. Especially I'm Mexican, and I can still see a lot of the influence that it has had on us. So I want to ask a more personal question. I identify as an Afro-Latina, so since I was a little girl, I always admired art, but sometimes I felt like there lacked people who, or just artwork that represented people who looked like me, of darker skin, you know, curlier hair, and so although it has changed, it has progressed now, I see more representation. There's still a lot of work to do, and specifically like talking about the U.S. and Cuba and the history of, you know, colorism. How have you seen your 20 years of Latino art beat? You know, how have you seen this issue being eradicated over time?
Well, at Latino Art Beat, we talk about Hispanic heritage and culture. And the Afro culture is a very, very important segment of our global culture, especially when we talk about descendants of Puerto Ricans and Cubans and Dominicans. Cuba in particular, because we're focusing on Cuba, they had slave trade with Africa. And many, many, many black Africans came over under that slave trade program. They integrated within the society, they intermarried, and I would say Cuba today, their arts are so strongly influenced by the Afro-Cuban culture. It really, really is. And this is another reason that I was very happy to be able to do something in Cuba, is to promote to our Afro-Latino cousins here in the United States that look at this rich culture that you're part of, and it should happen here. Now, Latino Art Beat, we don't require that you need to be Latino to participate in our program. And out of our Washington, D.C. program, most of our winners are African American or Afro-Latino. So we're making a difference, we're making a small difference, but you know, paso a paso, as we say, you know, we're getting to that point. Now, I also want to reflect on a personal relationship that I have with one of the members of parliament in Cuba, Miguel Burnett. And Miguel is the head and the founder of their Arts and Artists Society. So he's one of the top arts guy in Cuba. He has concentrated and written several books on the Afro-Cuban culture and how it has enriched the Cuban culture in general vis-a-vis African or Afro-Latino in the United States. He wrote 2 books. One is called Biography of a Runaway Slave, which I strongly recommend. If you could get a copy of it here, it's an amazing book. And he's done another dedicated study on Afro-Cuban religions, because you know, in Cuba, because of the African influence that came over, they brought their tribal religions. And they needed a substitute for the orishas, you know, the gods. So Santera grew out of this African influence there. And they even adopted the names of Christian and Catholic saints to correspond with Santeria. So when you look at the Afro-Cuban and Afro-Latino communities, we have to dissect it and say, we've gained this, we've gained this culture, we've gained this musical talent.
Yes, and I think it's beautiful that, you know, now more people from Latin America are want more of diversity, because at the beginning it was just like, you know, this praising the Spanish influence and indigenous, but not as much. And so there's just like this momentum that's happening now, and I see it on social media, in my families, etc. So I mean, you're part of that momentum as well. But I'm like intrigued by, you keep talking about the art, and can we see the art? Can you show us? And then
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Well,
we're
sitting behind us, as your audience is going to see, are two amazing pieces of artwork. I'll just move a little bit out of the way. And this was our first place winner in our competition this past year by a young 17-year-old, and his name is Luis Betancourt. And the theme of the competition, this is very important to understand, the theme of our competition is friendship between the youth of the United States and Cuba. So here's a young Cuban kid with the tower near the Malecon in Havana, and on top of the tower, he does the hand and the arm of the Statue of Liberty. On the bottom, he depicts himself and then his younger brother flying a kite. So this is how he pictured friendship between the youth of the United States and Cuba. And then as we move across, this is our second place winner. And this was done by Favio González, 16-year-old young man, extremely talented. And here he depicts an older United States tourist. I hate to say American because somos americanos, we're all Americans. Cubans are Americans, Puerto Ricans are Americans, Chileans are Americans, people from the United States are Americans. But this is a United States, an elderly tourist, being in Havana for the first time with his camera, and you see the tattered American flag in the background. And if we could look closely into the lens of the camera, it actually has the Cuban flag. So these two young Cuban artists won first and second place. And we sent them from Havana to Baltimore, Maryland, to study at the Maryland Institute College of Art, where they completed advanced high school, early college age courses. And when they went back to Cuba, they felt as though they could bring with them all of the new knowledge that they gained while they studied in Baltimore.
And you also brought out three different artworks. So can you explain them to us, please?
Absolutely. And I know you're going to maneuver the camera so that we can see that. Hopefully that's straight. And this young man won honorable mention or third place in our competition in Cuba. And his idea of friendship between the youth of the United States is represented in Mickey Mouse, one of our traditional cartoon characters. And the counterpart is Elpidio Valdez, who is the Cuban counterpart of Mickey Mouse. And that's how he drew it. We actually awarded him an enormous box of art supplies, which he was unable to get in Cuba. Now, we did run the competition in Havana. We ran it in Washington, D.C., and also in Miami. And we're going to show now a couple pieces from our American United States components. This piece was done by Xavier, a young Washington, D.C. student, and he captured the theme by showing the coloration difference between the white, the brown, and the browner, with the Cuban flag and in the American flag. And then the last piece that we have is the first place winner in the United States, also from a student in Washington, D.C., and he actually, Hector Castillo, he actually won a small scholarship to go to Columbia College here in Chicago.
Wow, that's amazing. You can see the diverse talent, but also the culture, their cultures being represented in like colors and different perspectives. So it's beautiful, and we can see art changing them. But I want to specifically ask, how are individuals, like youth in the Latino community, being changed? How do you see them being changed by just having the opportunity to express themselves through the things that they love to do?
Well, one of our national winners from Miami, a young lady called Candy Lopez, was our first place Miami winner many years ago. She then went on to become our national winner, and actually she was invited to give her testimony at the United States Department of Education, which I also attended, and this was during the Bush administration. And she talked about how important art has made an impact on her life. She later has become an incredible art teacher, and she's teaching students in Miami, and she always gives thanks to Latino Art Beat. She's one prime example, and there are so many that we've produced over the years where we've impacted the life of these young students.
Yes, and I actually read an expert of the students who won from the Cuba program, the initiative, and they were talking about how their experiences with the Latino Art Beat changed their lives. And this is the newspaper, but I highlighted a quote from Favio Felipe González, which he created this masterpiece.
This amazing piece.
He said, "My experience with Latino Art Beat has been a wonderful one, where I learned a new way of learning, of thinking, a newfound sense of confidence. It was a splendid experience, and I am very proud to have been a part of it, and I encourage other students to get involved." And so we see that art, something so simple that you just give these students the opportunity to do, has changed their lives. But this year you're having this program again, correct?
Yes.
And so
yes, we
I
are.
want to let the viewers know that if they have any questions or are interested in learning more about the event, they can go to the Latino Art Beat website. And you see, this is the artwork.
Yes,
that we
absolutely.
saw. This is the artist. But yeah, so they can get
And that's
in
a
contact
picture of
with
us
you.
in Miami City Hall with all of our winners from last year.
Okay, wonderful. So with that being said, now that they have information about the Cuba program, who would you like to give thanks to?
Well, this program was a difficult one, but it was made possible basically through the public liaison office of former President Obama during his administration. The United States Embassy in Havana, Cuba, pulled out all the stops to make sure that our Cuban kids got visas and their escort, because we had to have an escort come with them, Armando Valcarcel, who actually resembles Obama in a little way. And most of all, our long-term academic partner, the Maryland Institute College of Art. Without them, this program wouldn't have happened this past summer, and they're participating with us again by providing us with tuition support and room and board for our student winners. Also, I would like to thank our Cuba liaisons, Charlie Serrano and Kathy Enriquez Mayo, who've been very, very helpful with the logistics of this program.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Don, for coming here and having shown us the amazing artwork that these students have created, and we look forward to this year's program.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to be on CAN TV once again.
Thank you for watching.